They had the nerve to send it to me as if I was never erased in the first place. The cursor blinked like a slow heartbeat on my laptop, cutting through the hush of the studio. I sat still for a moment, my fingertips hovering just above the keys, unsure whether I wanted to laugh or rage. The light from the window had turned silver, slanting across the floorboards, touching canvases no one but I had seen. It had been nearly a decade since I was exiled from the Hastings estate. Not a legal exile, mind, you just one of those sterile betrayals dressed in polite silence. One day, you're in the will, the next you're a ghost. And now, they had the gall to invite me to a family gathering. I didn't even have to open the email to know what it was. I could feel its weight before I read a single word. Still, I clicked. Subject, family gathering. Location to be confirmed. From Patricia Hastings to undisclosed recipients, no hi Vivian. No hope you're well. Just a closing signature. With love, the Hastings. I exhaled through my nose. Amusing, really. A performance of reconciliation from people who'd once voted me out of my own bloodline. They sent it, I said aloud, voice almost lost to the room's silence. Graham looked up from the corner where he'd been organizing a stack of legal folders. He stepped closer, his footsteps soft against the hardwood. I saw it land in the inbox, he said cautiously. Wasn't sure if you wanted me to delete it. No, I said, my eyes still fixed on the screen. It's better this way. Let them think I'm still watching from the shadows. He moved beside me, setting a fresh cup of coffee on the table, one of the few rituals we still kept from the early days. Back then, it was just the two of us in a crumbling studio I could barely afford. Now it was a fortress, silent, meticulous, and wired into every inch of the Hastings portfolio. They used the old list again, Graham noted. The one before? Everything. That's the point, I said. They want to pretend I never left so they don't have to admit they pushed me out. He fell quiet, then asked, Are you going? They'll come to me, I said. They just don't know it yet. I rose from my chair and walked toward the wide, steel-framed window, wiping a smear of paint from the glass. Across the field stood the new gate, its modern design a deliberate break from the wrought iron curls of the original estate. It curved upward like a sculpture, dignified but dangerous. The nameplate was hidden for now, but the etching was there beneath the frosted glass Vivian Cross. My name. Not Hastings. The air smelled faintly of turpentine and cold steel. In the corner, an unfinished canvas leaned against the wall, thick with charcoal outlines. I hadn't painted since the zoning deed arrived in my name 6 months ago. Too much legal wiring, too many back-channel filings, too many nights whispering with Graham about tax structures and silent takeovers. No one in the family had noticed. They never checked the names on the holding companies. A mistake they were going to regret. They're still planning the reunion, I asked, voice low. Graham nodded. No formal location yet, but it's implied. The family estate's always been their stage. Of course, that cursed house on the hill. That's where they closed the trust, where my name was voted off the ledger, where my father stayed silent. They'll return to the nest, I said softly. They always do when the press needs a photo. He didn't answer. He didn't need to. Graham understood the weight of unspoken things. We'd built this plan together from the ashes, piece by piece, never rushing, never forgetting. I turned back to the desk. The email still glowed on the screen, sterile and smug. Let them come, I said. The gate won't lock from the outside. I opened the terminal. The cursor blinked. One line of code was all it took. Light up nameplate, front gate. I hit enter. They didn't just erase my name from the trust. They buried my father's will beside him. 5 years earlier, winter gripped Manhattan in ice. Outside the law office's tall windows, snow twisted in sullen flurries against the glass. But inside the air was still too still. The room was a study in silence. Dark walnut paneling, a heavy Persian rug, and a fire that flickered but never warmed. The only sound was the slow shuffling of paper, as if every movement was hesitant to disturb the truth. I sat at the long table, hands folded trying to control the shake in my fingers. To my right sat Patricia, legs crossed elegantly, her eyes bored. To my left, Todd hunched over his chair, staring at his cufflinks as if they held the secrets of the world. Across from us, Marjorie Hastings. My mother was a statue of grief, her eyes dry, her lips tight. Harold Green, our family lawyer for over 2 decades, cleared his throat. This is the final and legally binding testament of Charles Everett Hastings. He began, voice steady, but uncomfortably low. Signed and dated December 3rd, 2018. My ears rang. I blinked. December 3rd. But that was after his stroke. Before I could speak, Harold continued reading through the opening statements, the list of assets, the allocations. Trusts for Patricia and Todd. Control over the foundation to be transferred to the Hastings Board. Real estate holdings divided. Royalties from licensing agreements assigned. My name. Not once. Not even a condolence clause. It was as if I never existed. I sat frozen. I had cared for him through his last months. We spoke daily. We reviewed his plans, his hopes for Hastings Innovations, for its integrity, for its legacy. I still had his notes scribbled in the margins of our last business model. He called me the one who dreams forward. And now I was invisible. I turned to Harold. Is this a mistake? He adjusted his glasses. This is the version on file. There is no mention of any alternative draft. That's impossible. I looked to my mother, who finally moved barely. Her gaze remained on the fire. Charles changed his mind, she said coolly. He decided it was best to remove you from the burden. You were too fragile for this world. I stared at her. You said he admired my vision. He did, she said without blinking. But admiration doesn't make you capable. The air left my lungs. Patricia yawned. Honestly, Vivian, it's not like you didn't see this coming. What? She waved a hand. You were always the emotional one. Business requires teeth. And betrayal, I hissed. Todd shifted, but said nothing. You knew, I whispered, turning to him. Didn't you? His lips parted, then closed. He couldn't meet my eyes. I stood, fury and heartbreak colliding. You've stolen a ghost's word. Harold blinked. There was a previous draft, but Mr. Hastings gave instructions to void it before his stroke. He had the stroke on November 30th, I snapped. You just said this was dated December 3rd. Silence. Patricia rolled her eyes. Technicalities. You know how slow courts are. No, I said. I know how fast vultures move. But the truth was, I had known something was wrong for months. Father had asked me to help him draft a new model of the foundation, one that prioritized innovation over expansion. He said he wanted me to guide it, not inherit it, but guard it. You'll be my conscience, he told me. 2 weeks before the stroke, he had called Graham into his office and locked the door. I wasn't allowed in. Later that day, Graham confided that he'd seen my name on a folder labeled Addendum, January Implementation. But that folder was never mentioned again. I stormed out of the law firm, barely remembering how I got to the hallway. My heels echoed on the marble as I tried to breathe through the blur. The building was old heritage, just like our name, and its walls felt like they were watching me. Near the elevator, Graham appeared, coat already draped over his arm. He must have seen my face and knew better than to ask. Still, he walked beside me until we reached the car. Inside, as the city lights passed in a blur, he finally spoke. Something's wrong, he murmured. The dates don't match. Her eyes looked just like mine, curious, uninvited, and already unwelcome. I didn't plan to see anyone that morning. After reading the email, I had told myself I needed fresh air solitude. Westport Park was quiet at this hour. Only the faint hum of distant traffic and the rustling of dry leaves answered my footsteps. But fate rarely obeys intention. Near the pond beneath a yellowing canopy of oak trees, a child skipped stones with alarming precision. I recognized her before I recognized the man trailing behind her. Todd, my brother. Older now, thinner, but unmistakably the same, in that rigid posture, that hesitant gait. The girl turned first. Her gaze locked with mine like she'd been expecting me. She didn't smile or run, just observed me calm and direct as if placing a face to a name she already knew. "Are you the artist who paints shadows?" she asked, walking up to me like I wasn't a stranger at all. I blinked. "I suppose I am." "Who told you that you're Vivian Cross?" she said. "I saw your name under the picture of the lady looking through the glass." Todd's voice cracked from behind her. "Lily, come here, now!" But she didn't move. "She's not scary, Daddy." Todd approached cautiously, as if I might explode into accusations or tears. I didn't. "She follows art blogs," he said. "Your work. It's hard to miss." "I wasn't hiding," I replied. "Just not where they were looking." He gave a tight nod, unreadable. Lily tilted her head. "Why do you paint shadows? They tell stories. Light forgets." I answered before I realized how honest that was. She smiled as if she understood, then pulled a rolled-up paper from her backpack. "I made this for you." I took it gently. Crayon rough but deliberate. A house with ivy on the walls, a curved iron gate, and above it a name Vivian Cross. I stiffened. "Where did you see this?" "I saw it in my dream." "First," she said brightly. "Then Talia showed me a picture, but it was blurry. So I fixed it." Todd paled. "Talia showed you what?" "Just a photo," Lily said. She didn't say anything. "But it was yours, right?" I nodded slowly. "That gate's not finished yet. And no one's supposed to know the name." "She guessed," Lily said. "She always guesses right." I turned and spotted Talia crouched behind a tree, pretending to film ducks. Her phone wasn't pointed at the water. Todd sighed. "Vivian, this wasn't planned. We didn't mean to bump into you." I stared at him. "You think she sees me by accident? I know." "I don't know. Maybe it's better this way. For Lily." He meant well, but that's what made it worse. Good intentions with cowardly outcomes. "She sees more than you ever did," I said. Todd shifted, uncomfortable. "Look, I was never part of the decision. I didn't fight it, but—" "You let them bury me," I interrupted. "Not just in the trust, in memory." He winced. "You know how Mom is." "No. You know how she is. You just never stood between her and me." Lily fidgeted beside him, watching us both. I softened and knelt again. "Did you draw this all by yourself?" "Yes." Her eyes sparkled. "You were in the window. You looked sad." I smiled faintly. "I might have been." "Do you like it?" she asked. "I love it," I said. "It means more than you know." Todd looked at her, then at me. "I want to make this right." "You can't make it right," I replied. "But you can watch closely. Starting now." Behind us, Talia stepped from behind the tree. "I filmed her because Lily said you were the ghost," she said. "And she wanted to meet a ghost." I arched an eyebrow. "Did she? Now?" "She said ghosts aren't dead, just invisible." Lily nodded solemnly. "And some ghosts come back?" I glanced at Todd. "She's not wrong." He looked hollowed out. "Vivian, don't I said?" "Not yet." As they turned to leave, Lily waved. "Will I see you again?" "I think you already do," I whispered. "You think she sees me by accident? They built monuments to themselves. I built silence that could speak louder." I stood before the estate, the morning mist rising like a veil between me and the steel gate I had forged into existence. The nameplate was still dark silent for now, but its edges gleamed under the cold November light waiting to speak when they arrived. Graham emerged from the surveillance van, holding a black tablet. His steps were precise, his face unreadable, as always. "They finished embedding the plate this morning," he said. "Sensor-triggered, motion activated. Once their plates cross the detection zone, your name lights up in 6-inch illuminated letters. No delay." I nodded. "How's the feed?" He tapped the screen. Footage bloomed across it, 12 panels, 12 angles. One for each driveway sensor, another for the approach paths, and several for the dining hall. Everything's running clean. Backup servers are in sync. Full redundancy. The house is watching. I stepped forward, placing a hand on the cold surface of the gate. It hummed faintly beneath my fingertips, quiet and waiting. It had presence like a monument carved without permission. "They always said I'd never build anything real," I said quietly. "That my art wasn't legacy material. And now Graham murmured, "You've built something they can't ignore." I turned from the gate and faced the house. Its architecture was brutal and minimalist steel beams, wide windows and clean white surfaces, broken only by the warmth of natural wood slats. No portraits, no symbols, just geometry and shadow. I had designed every inch myself, right down to the screws. This wasn't a home. It was a stage. We entered through the side entrance, bypassing the main foyer. The interior was silent, but not dead motion detectors registered us with soft green pulses as we moved past. Light rose gently along the walls, simulating afternoon sun, even in the dull gray of morning. We passed the dining room. The table, 30 feet long, was set with minimalist black plates and a single runner of gray linen. No candles, no flowers, just space, measured and intentional. Above us, recessed, lighting masked pinhole cameras. Beneath every seat, directional microphones nested between the floorboards. I had the techs do one last sweep, Graham said. No leaks, no wireless interference. And I replaced the primary drive with a new encrypted Module 1. Even the feds would need a warrant to crack. I smiled faintly. Perfect. In the hallway, a technician paused beside a power box, staring up at the ceiling with a frown. "This place has presence," he said, mostly to himself, like someone's watching even when the lights are off. "They're right," I said, not breaking stride. We entered the main control room, really a studio repurposed from my former workspace. Blank canvases still lined the walls. Not because I had nothing left to say, because I had already said everything elsewhere. "This is where I'll sit," I told Graham, gesturing to the chair at the console. "During the reunion. Out of sight, in control, and if they ask who owns the place, they won't. They're not used to asking, just assuming." He handed me a slim brushed steel case. Inside were 2 labeled drives, day and backup. All recordings will be mirrored in real time. "Off-site encryption triggers if anything goes down," he said, "and the fail-safe you requested recording cannot be stopped once it starts. Not even by me." I took the case and tucked it beneath my desk drawer. We returned to the entrance where the gate was still locked, my name yet to appear. Graham lifted his tablet and asked, "You sure about this?" I stared into the trees. They wanted a house to meet in. I gave them one. With a name, they refused to speak. He pressed the test command. A low whir, then bright and unforgiving letters ignited across the steel surface, Vivian Cross. White, sharp, undeniable. My name etched in light across the gate they'd soon walk through without knowing who had placed it there. It glowed like truth that had waited too long in silence. I never imagined, Graham said, that silence could scream. "That's because you've never been erased?" I replied. In the control booth, I opened my laptop. The security system's interface was glowing green, all feeds active, microphones primed, memory partitions ready to log every breath and whisper. One feed showed the front gate, another the approach road, another the main dining hall from above. This was no ordinary family gathering. I sat down and opened an old recorder I kept since my college days, old tech analog, intentionally untraceable. I pressed play. A voice rang out, clipped, brittle, unmistakably hers. "You're no longer part of this family." The words hung in the air like ice in my lungs. I watched the waveform pulse. Then, without hesitation, I clicked delete. Gone. I looked up straight into the overhead camera lens, my voice calm, my eyes steady. "Neither are they. They plan to feast on inheritance." I set the table, but not for them. The room had no windows, just walls of curved white plaster that caught light like skin. Soft, warm, human. I stood at the center of the dining room, or what they'd think was a dining room. It was actually a stage, my stage. The light fixtures were arranged not just for ambiance, but precision. Every bulb, every shadow had been rehearsed. The long walnut table, sanded to a matte finish, stretched beneath a sculptural chandelier that hovered like a question mark. 12 chairs surrounded it, but only one was real. The others were nothing more than optical tricks, projections crafted by an LED illusion system custom-built into the ceiling grid. Sit and you'd fall through air. But from a distance, they were convincing, perfect, like my family's sense of themselves. This wasn't revenge. It was a lesson in perception, in how easily they trusted what they could not touch. Talia adjusted the mounted camera behind me, wiping the lens with a soft cloth. "So, this is the room," she said, spinning slowly in a circle. "You designed all this just for them to see themselves," I replied, "and for the world to see who they really are." She tilted her head. "So, this isn't revenge." "No, this is truth. Revenge is noisy. I want silence to echo." Graham entered carrying a slim white case, his steps echoing across the gallery-like floor. The microphones are embedded into the wood grains. You won't see them, but they'll pick up everything. Whispers, sighs, clinks of silverware. And the visuals, I asked. 360 degrees. Ceiling corners, even the reflections from the floor. No angle left unrecorded. When it's time, we'll have all the footage you need. I walked to the head of the table, the one real chair. Its legs were slightly uneven on purpose, just enough to make the person sitting feel unsteady. I touched its back, felt the roughness beneath the polish. Every piece was handcrafted, but not by me. That would have been too poetic. I'd hired artisans from upstate who specialized in building furniture that provoked discomfort, subtle tension invisible to the eye, but registered in the body. "They think this is a reunion," I murmured. "But it's a reveal. Of all the illusions, they believe this room will be the last." Footsteps. I turned. Todd stood at the threshold, folder in hand, his tie half loosened as if he'd stepped away from some urgent call. He wasn't supposed to be here yet. I was told to pick up a document, he said, eyes glancing at Talia, then me, then the table. "It's on the console near the entrance." Graham replied evenly, not looking up. Todd didn't move toward it, his eyes fixed on the table, the chair, then on the shadows. He stepped closer, narrowing his gaze. "Where are the other chairs?" he asked. "They're here," I said simply. "Just not the way you expect." He took another step forward, then stopped. His face registered it before his voice could. The light cast his name faintly on the floor beneath one of the phantom chairs. Todd Hastings. It flickered once, then steadied. But the chair itself was not there. Only light. Only illusion. He looked at me, something unreadable in his eyes, and then looked away. "You built all this?" he asked, softer now. "No," I said. "I designed it. The difference matters." Todd didn't respond. He turned toward the door, the folder still in hand. But before he stepped out, he paused again. His voice came without turning. "She's been asking about you." "Lily." I said nothing. The silence was my answer. He left. Talia watched him go, then looked at me. "You okay?" I nodded. "Better than ever." I turned toward the lights and picked up the remote Graham had left. One button. That's all it would take. The timer was set. When their cars approached the estate on the day of the reunion, the system would activate cameras, mics, lighting cues, everything in place. It would look like a dinner, but it would be something else entirely. Art, performance, a reckoning. I adjusted the placement of a wine glass, not to be filled, but to reflect the light in just the right angle, bending it toward the floor, where Patricia's name would appear. Vivian stood at the center of the empty room, the solitary chair gleaming under a soft halo. Let the dinner begin. They expected a stranger's mansion. They didn't expect the name on the gate to be mine. The fog settled low over Westport, clinging to the hedges like a shroud of hesitation. From where I sat behind the mirrored glass of the upstairs control room, every movement at the gate played out in high-definition clarity. Headlights cut through the mist, slow and uncertain, as the black Escalade rolled toward the entrance. License plate, NY38RMN. The system flagged it instantly. Patricia's car. Inside the control panel, a soft chime confirmed the match. I leaned forward. "Graham." "Are we recording?" I asked, voice even. "All channels live," he replied. Audio and visual, timestamp locked. Outside, Patricia was the first to exit, adjusting her silk scarf like armor. Her posture betrayed no uncertainty, but her eyes darted between the hedges, the unfamiliar gravel, the silence. Alan followed. Then Marjorie, wrapped in an elegant coat too stiff for warmth. Todd stepped out next his hand, lightly guiding Lily, whose eyes were wide with curiosity. She clutched a folded paper in her hand. They stood at the gate, all five of them, staring at the grand archway. The steel frame shimmered with hidden lights off, for now dormant. A beat passed. Then Graham pressed the activation switch. The gate groaned softly as it began to open. From beneath the ground, a subtle rumble stirred, mechanized, rehearsed, perfect. And then the lights ignited. Letters 6 feet high flared across the gate's top bar in electric white, Vivian Cross Residence. Patricia froze. She took half a step back. Marjorie's lips tightened. Alan raised a brow, but said nothing. Lily whispered, "That's Aunt Vivian's name," and pointed, smiling. Todd didn't move. He looked straight ahead and murmured, "She did this." Back in the control room, I watched their reactions like frames in a painting. My heart didn't race. There was no glee, just the cold satisfaction of symmetry. The house they once believed stolen now bore the name they erased. "Welcome to the house you thought you took from me," I said aloud to no one in particular. The microphone picked it up anyway, recorded it, etched it into the timeline. The gate yawned, wide, beckoning. For a moment, Marjorie looked ready to turn back. Her hand touched the car door, fingers trembling. Then Graham appeared, immaculate, in dark navy, holding a leather-bound guest list. "Mrs. Hastings," he said smoothly. "Mr. and Mrs. Vance. Todd. Lily. We've been expecting you." He paused before each name, and as he said them, the sensor-lit pavers beneath their feet illuminated individually, one by one. No one could pretend it wasn't deliberate. Todd cleared his throat. "We should go in," he muttered. Patricia hesitated, but pride is louder than fear. She lifted her chin and walked forward. Inside, the lights were warmer, but the air remained taut. The hall was minimalist. White walls, walnut trim, floor-length curtains that moved without breeze. No photos, no clutter, just space curated to observe and remember. The foyer swallowed them in silence. Lily reached for Todd's hand, and he gave it without thinking. In the control room, I watched them move through the entryway, passing by the art installation titled Inheritance Echo. No one noticed the concealed lens embedded in the sculpture's eye. The dining room awaited beyond shrouded, for now lights dimmed. Marjorie finally spoke. Her voice clipped. "I thought this was rented." "It's not," Alan replied. "Too specific." Patricia opened her mouth to argue, but said nothing. The lights led them forward. I turned to Graham. "Begin interior recording sequence." He nodded, tapping the command. A soft, green glow blinked to life beside each embedded microphone. Downstairs, a subtle chime echoed from the speakers, just enough to make them stop. Then, my voice pre-recorded filled the room with velvet precision. "Welcome, Hastings family." They turned, startled. No speaker was visible, just walls and lights. "This dinner is for you. Please proceed to the dining room." Their eyes darted around. Marjorie's face blanched. Patricia's lips moved without sound. Todd held Lily's shoulder gently protectively, and then slowly, they walked. In the dining room, the table stretched 12 feet gleaming minimalist, surrounded by ghostly silhouettes. 11 chairs, ethereal projections of light, and only one real chair with a glass of wine already poured. The microphone on the chandelier clicked to life. "Dinner is served." They clinked glasses without knowing they were drinking, to their own undoing. The dining room radiated warmth, at least that was the illusion. The glow from recessed ceiling lights played gently across the polished table, catching the subtle glimmer of the etched crystal glassware. Beneath the surface, beauty though, tension, thickened the air like humidity before a storm. Patricia took her seat at the head of the table. Technically, it wasn't a real chair. None of them were, except one. but the light projections fooled the eye-casting shadows that moved when no one shifted. Vivian watched from the glass-paneled room above, seated on the only chair that had legs and weight, sipping from her own untouched glass of wine. To family, Patricia announced, raising her flute with a performative smile. "May old ghosts stay buried." There was a slight pause before the others followed suit. Alan hesitated, then tapped his glass to Patricia's. Marjorie's hand moved like clockwork, robotic lips pressing into a line instead of a smile. Todd clinked gently, eyes distant. Lily reached for her water with both hands and joined the toast with a bright grin. Above them, behind mirrored glass, Vivian didn't move. The words settled heavy in her chest. "Ghosts stay buried." She thought of her father's will, of the silence that followed his death, of her name, erased like a typo. No, she wouldn't stay buried. Not this time. Marjorie leaned toward Graham, who stood quietly at the far end of the room. "And the host?" she asked, voice clipped. "Surely she'll join us." Graham smiled with trained precision. "She's here in every detail." Marjorie blinked. Todd raised an eyebrow. Patricia interjected. "I assume she's just shy. Or perhaps this is some curated experience, artistic avant-garde." She gestured toward the walls. "Look at these paintings. They're deliberately haunting." Todd turned his gaze toward the artwork. The gallery-style arrangement framed the long dining space, a series of portraits, some realistic, others abstracted, just enough to suggest memory rather than moment. A picnic under the sycamore trees. Christmas by the fire. The siblings as children seated on the living room rug. In every piece, Vivian was present, but only just. Her image was muted, out of focus, sometimes a shadow or silhouette with no face. In one painting, her arm extended into the frame, but her face was turned away. A child holding a paintbrush, but no smile, no joy. Todd stood up quietly, walking closer to the largest canvas. It showed the Hastings family in the front yard of the old estate, Charles seated proudly, Marjorie in pearls, Patricia mid-laugh, and Todd looking at the camera. Vivian stood behind them, slightly off-center. Her face was faded, blurred, like she had already been forgotten. He frowned. These weren't here before he muttered. "What's wrong?" Patricia asked, barely glancing up from her drink. Lily had already slipped from her seat and tiptoed toward the paintings. Her eyes scanned each one, curious and bright, until she stopped in front of the Christmas portrait. "Daddy?" she said, pointing. "Why is Aunt Vivian not smiling here?" The room froze. Patricia shifted. Marjorie lowered her fork. Alan cleared his throat. No one answered. Todd exhaled slowly. "I don't know." Vivian's finger hovered over the control panel. "Graham," she said quietly. "Music." With a single tap, soft piano filled the room from unseen speakers. The track was subtle, but unmistakable. Things left unsaid. The melody drifted through the air like smoke, familiar and uncomfortably intimate. The lyrics didn't begin until the second verse, but everyone recognized the tune. It was Charles Hastings' favorite song played at his funeral. The room seemed to shrink with the weight of memory. Marjorie pushed her chair back slightly. "I didn't approve this playlist." Graham only smiled. It was curated by the owner. Every piece intentional. Patricia's voice faltered. "This is getting theatrical." Alan reached for the wine. "We're here now. Let's not make it more awkward than it already is." But Todd was no longer drinking. He stared at the painting again, at the shadow of a girl erased. His hand found Lily's shoulder. "I think she's watching us," he said under his breath. Vivian's gaze sharpened at that. She leaned closer to the glass, not smiling. In the corner of the room, near the decorative plant wall, a small blinking light blinked red, then green. Unnoticed, tucked into the decor, it streamed a feed, low-resolution, partial angle, just enough to catch their expressions. Talia's anonymous live stream was live. The caption read simply, "Silence speaks loudest." And the dinner was only beginning. Truth doesn't shout. It whispers, then it echoes. The house had long since fallen into silence. Outside, the trees stood frozen under a pale November moon, and inside, the light from Vivian's study glowed like a lighthouse on the shore of reckoning. She leaned over her desk, fingers trailing over the grain of the walnut surface, her eyes fixed on the monitor in front of her. Beside her, Talia hunched over her laptop, eyes scanning footage like a detective combing through a crime scene. "I was indexing audio backups." Talia said, her voice tight, and found something tucked inside the directory from the hallway camera system. Her fingers tapped quickly. A file appeared on the screen. Just edited. Will. MP3. Vivian didn't speak. She simply nodded once, sharp and deliberate. Talia clicked play. Static. Then a voice, cold, unmistakable. "As long as Vivian never sees this, we're safe." It was Patricia. That sugary control layered beneath a venomous truth. A man's voice responded, hesitant. "But the signature, it doesn't match the final draft." "Are you sure?" Positive Patricia replied. "Dad was too far gone by then to care. We had to make decisions for the good of the trust." Vivian's breath caught not in shock, but recognition. Her jaw clenched as the conversation played on. "This is the version Harold will read," Patricia continued. "And as far as anyone else knows, it's the only one that exists." The audio ended in a low click. Talia froze. "I thought you were just being paranoid," she said quietly. Graham, who had entered moments before, stepped up and asked, "Where did that file come from?" "From Patricia's laptop folder in the main archive." "Buried under decoy footage?" Talia replied. "Metadata?" he asked, already moving toward the screen. Talia opened the file details. Created October 29th, 2018, 2 days before the final will was presented. Audio device registered to Patricia Hastings. Vivian closed her eyes. "That's our proof," Graham said. "Fraud, intent, conspiracy." Vivian opened them again. They were colder now, sharper, which means it's not just a mistake, she said. It was always a knife, held quietly, smiling. Graham leaned in, lowering his voice. "But if we release it, we open ourselves to liability. Depending on how that audio was captured, they might come after us with privacy laws." Talia bit her lip. "Even if it proves they altered the will, they'll spin it," Graham said. "They'll say it's doctored or illegally obtained." Vivian looked at the screen again. "Let them. I've lived under the weight of their silence. Now they'll live under the sound of mine." Silence followed. Talia looked uneasy. "If we leak this, they'll be destroyed." Vivian didn't hesitate. "Then they'll understand how I felt." From the hallway, something shifted. The door creaked and Todd stepped in. Slowly, his face half in shadow, half in light. His expression was unreadable. But his eyes flicked to the monitor, then back to his sister. "How long have you been standing there?" Graham asked. Todd ignored him. His voice was flat. "That's Patricia." Vivian nodded. "You have more." "That's enough for now," she said. He walked toward the desk, arms crossed. "I remember Dad saying something before his stroke. He was worried about pressure. He didn't trust the rest of them to make decisions." Vivian studied him. "But you still stood with them." "I thought you walked away." "No," she said, voice razor-edged. "I was pushed." Todd looked down. "She said you refused your share, that you wanted out." Vivian turned the screen so he could see the waveform frozen mid-lie. "They said a lot of things." Todd exhaled the sound, brittle. And now, Vivian's hand hovered over the keyboard. "Now we decide if we strike before they leave or after they fall," Graham finished. Todd stood silently. He walked to the door, paused, then said, without turning, "Whatever you do, they won't be able to pretend anymore." And then he was gone. Vivian watched the doorway long after he'd disappeared. From the laptop, Patricia's voice echoed faintly again in the playback buffer. "As long as Vivian never sees this, we're safe." But she had. And she wasn't safe. They weren't either. The calmest moments are the ones we pay for later. The garden behind the estate was soaked in silver fog and stillness. The grass held beads of dew, and every surface shimmered with the ghost of yesterday's rain. Todd sat on the cold bench, elbows resting on his knees, head bowed as if in penance. The silence around him wasn't peace. It was a question waiting for an answer. Vivian approached from the east path. Her boots barely whispered against the gravel. She said nothing as she sat beside him close enough to share warmth far enough to hold the distance history required. For a moment, it was just breath fog and things too old to say aloud. "I didn't know they'd go that far," Todd said, voice low. "I knew they didn't love you the same. I knew they were cruel. But this tampering with a will, making it disappear?" Vivian didn't turn her head. "Cruelty's easy when no one holds you accountable." He let the words settle. "You think I'm like them. I think you didn't stop them." A long exhale. "You're right." They sat in silence again until a tiny voice cut through the morning haze. Aunt Vivian Lily came skipping down the stone steps wearing an oversized hoodie and rainbow sneakers. In her hands, she held another one of her sketches scribbled in colored pencil and crayon, the kind children make with big emotion and limited technique. "I made this for you." Vivian forced a smile as the girl held up the drawing. It was the gate, her gate, the one with her name in bold letters, Vivian Cross. Above it, Lily had drawn stars, and beneath a glowing house filled with what looked like music notes and dancing shadows. "You're the only one who paints the truth," Lily said, throwing her arms around Vivian's waist. Todd watched, visibly shaken. "She doesn't understand what's happening." "No," Vivian replied, softly stroking Lily's hair. "But she understands more than you ever did." Todd's mouth opened, then shut again. He looked at the house. "She shouldn't be here for this. Whatever happens today, she doesn't deserve to carry the cost." Vivian stood, then pulled a USB drive from the inside of her coat. She handed it to Todd. "You'll need this." "What is it?" "Proof. Backup files. Scans. Dad's original trust agreement. Audio clips Patricia deleted. It's not just about me, they tried to erase him too." Todd turned the drive over in his hand, as if it might bite. "You're really going through with this?" he asked. "I already did. The truth's out now. What matters is what they do next." Todd looked over at Lily, who had returned to the bench and was humming softly to herself. "I'll take her back to the hotel." "She trusts you," Vivian said. "Don't give her a reason not to." He nodded. "What happens if they fight back?" Vivian didn't blink. "Then they'll feel what I did for 5 years." He looked like he wanted to say something else, but the words wouldn't come. Instead, he pocketed the USB and turned to walk Lily back through the fog. Inside the studio, Graham and Talia stood watching the live feed on a curved monitor. Thousands of viewers were flooding into the anonymous stream Talia had launched just hours earlier. A waveform pulsed on-screen, Patricia's voice playing again and again. "As long as Vivian never sees this, we're safe." Talia looked over. It's spreading fast. Dozens of reposts already. Some law students are even breaking it down. Timestamp discrepancies, voice print matches. Graham crossed his arms. "This won't end in a comment section." "No," Vivian said as she entered the room, pulling off her gloves. "But it might start there." Talia sat back. "If the lawyers catch wind of this, if they move first," "They won't," Vivian interrupted. "Because they don't believe the world cares. They think it's still 2018. They think no one listens to women like me." She moved toward the main control panel and tapped the glass. Another window opened. Analytics download counts, viewer retention graphs. The numbers climbed with every second. Vivian's reflection stared back at her from the screen, older, sharper, less forgiving. "Let it run. Let the silence get loud." Then Graham's earpiece lit up. He glanced toward Vivian. Media inquiries already started. Local reporters. One asked if Vivian Cross would be making a public statement. Vivian's lips curled. "Tell them no. Not yet. Not ever." Outside, the fog began to lift. But no one inside was fooled. The worst part of the storm was always just before it broke. Talia's voice cut the quiet. "It's live. The video's going viral. They erased my name from the will. I carved it into their legacy. From the second they stepped into my house and saw their faces mirrored in my walls, distorted, reimagined, and incomplete, they should have known this wasn't a gathering. It was a reckoning." By late afternoon, The whispers had turned into murmurs. The world outside the estate buzzed, journalists clustered at the perimeter, like vultures circling something freshly wounded. But inside silence reigned. It was the kind of silence that demanded attention, the kind that suffocates before it speaks. I stood at the top of the staircase, watching them all gather in the great hall. Graham moved fluidly through the room, placing drinks on coasters no one dared touch. My mother sat rigid on the velvet settee, lips tight as if any crack would let the truth spill. Patricia paced with the nervous arrogance of someone used to staging appearances, not surviving them. Her husband, Alan, hovered near the marble fireplace, checking his phone every 30 seconds. Todd leaned against the far wall, unreadable. Angela Pierce. My attorney arrived precisely at 4. Her heels clicked against the Italian tile like a metronome of authority. I nodded, and Graham dimmed the lights. The screen descended silently from the ceiling. I pressed play. The room filled with the unmistakable voice of Patricia. As long as Vivian never sees this, we're safe. The audio was crisp, irrefutable. Then came Harold Green's voice. The family's long-trusted lawyer Charles would never have signed this version. The sound paused. I let the weight of it settle. What the hell is this? Patricia demanded, stepping forward. Angela spoke before I could. It's called the truth, and I'm here to represent it. She opened her leather folio and removed a document sealed in plastic. This, she said, is the original will of Charles Hastings, notarized and verified, with third-party time-stamping bank access logs and digital fingerprinting. It names Vivian Cross as majority beneficiary and trustee of the Hastings Foundation. You hacked my system, Patricia snarled. I smiled calmly. No, you left the door open. You always did, especially when you thought no one was watching. My mother's knuckles whitened on the armrest. You forged that. Angela raised an eyebrow. Forged a biometric signature with retinal scan verification from a bank vault. That's bold even for this family. Patricia's voice trembled. This isn't over. It is for me, I said. Todd stepped forward. Lips parted as if to speak, but he hesitated. His eyes found Lily's drawing again, still clutched in his pocket. The energy in the room shifted. You all sat at a table with one real chair and thought your reflections made you whole, I said. You toasted your illusions, not knowing the walls were listening. Outside, the press shouted questions. The estate's iron gate was locked, but truth didn't need keys. It seeped through wires and airwaves already carried across live streams and screenshots. Angela tapped a folder on the table. Multiple outlets have confirmed the leak. We have affidavits, certified timestamps, and bank witnesses. We're moving forward. Alan muttered something unintelligible under his breath and stormed out of the room. Patricia followed, face-flushed phone glued to her ear. Marjorie tried to stand, but swayed. Graham, ever the silent observer, offered her a hand she didn't take. This house is mine, I said slowly. This name is mine. And now, so is the truth. For a moment, no one moved. Then Graham entered, holding a small key ring and an old metal case. There's one more thing they don't know, and it's in your father's safe. Angela turned to me. Do you want to open it now? I looked at the key ring in Graham's hand. Aged brass, heavy with time. I recognized the tag. My father's initials carved in black walnut. He'd always said the safe was for what really mattered. Not yet, I replied. Let them sweat. Outside, the media presence intensified. Drones hovered, their soft hum echoing over the estate. Journalists shouted names, theories, questions. It didn't matter. They weren't my audience. Not anymore. I turned to the portraits that lined the walls, paintings I'd done of our family, each one slightly off. Eyes too wide, mouths closed too tight. Now they felt like prophecy. My mother looked away. Todd stood silent, but his silence had changed. I spent 5 years building something they could never steal, I said. They took my name off paper. I burned it into architecture. Angela placed the will back into her briefcase and snapped it shut. What's next? I smiled faintly. We let the truth do what it does best. The storm was no longer coming. It was already here, and for once, I was the one standing dry in the center of it. Graham met my eyes and gave a slow, deliberate nod. The reckoning had only begun. Some secrets are buried. Others are locked away, waiting to be heard. Todd's shoes crunched faintly on the dusty floor, his shadow trailing just behind mine as we descended the narrow staircase to the basement. The air was colder here, not from temperature, but memory, thick with years of silence of things left unsaid. Graham had already lit the small overhead bulb, its yellow glow casting soft shadows against the chipped brick walls. In the far corner stood the safe Charles Hastings old combination vault untouched for at least half a decade. "I never even knew this place existed," Todd muttered. His voice was small, like a child stumbling into his parents' locked study. "You weren't meant to," I replied, my eyes fixed on the safe's iron face. "He only brought me here once." Graham knelt his gloved fingers, working over the brass dial. "The code was embedded in the blueprints he gave you," he said, turning the dial with deliberate precision. He hid it in plain sight. There was a heavy clunk, and the safe creaked open. The stale scent of paper and oil drifted out. Inside, nestled in a velvet-lined box, were 3 items, a sealed envelope marked "To be read by Vivian." Only a leather-bound sketchbook and a folded parchment with Charles's signature clearly visible across the bottom. I reached for the envelope with trembling hands. The wax seal broke with a soft crack. Inside was a letter, my father's handwriting unmistakable. The ink had faded slightly, but the words cut through time. "Vivian, you've always seen what others couldn't. That's why I chose you. They'll say you were unstable, selfish, unfit. But they never understood that legacy isn't money, it's vision. Whatever they've told you, know this, I never changed the will. I only delayed its release because I feared what they'd do if they found out. If you're reading this, it means they did it anyway. Let them see what you were always meant to carry. Love, Dad." I closed the letter slowly, the ache in my chest no longer hollow. This was no longer about vindication. It was confirmation that I had never been wrong. They had. Graham handed the sketchbook to Angela, our lawyer. She flipped it open gently. Inside were drawings, some dated years ago, plans for the legacy project, the creative trust my father and I had envisioned together. My handwriting intertwined with his. Ideas scribbled in margins. One design bore the title "Vivian Cross Foundation, a trust in my name." Angela looked up, eyes shining. These sketches and this letter, they establish intent. Coupled with the video and the recording, you don't just have motive, you have provenance. "I told you," I said softly, brushing dust off the edges of the book. "They tried to bury a legacy, but it grew in silence." Todd took a step forward, then paused. "He really chose you." "Not because I'm better," I answered, "because I was the only one who still believed in building something." Angela's phone buzzed. She glanced at the screen and frowned. "The court clerk just called. Once we submit these, it triggers a review. Patricia and your mother may face perjury if it's proven they withheld or forged documents." I nodded slowly. "Let them. Truth doesn't shout. It whispers, then it echoes." We began scanning and cataloging everything. Graham worked the camera. Todd hovered nearby, no longer a passive observer, but an anchor. The man who once voted me out now stood guard while I reclaimed what was rightfully mine. Then Angela's phone buzzed again. A message, anonymous, encrypted. She frowned and turned the screen toward me. "If this goes public, we all burn, including you." The silence in the room grew heavy, pressing against us like a tide. But I didn't flinch. I looked at Todd. "That's fear talking. And fear," he said quietly, "is always loudest right before it loses." We stood in a room full of forgotten truths. I held the letter like a torch. For the first time in years, I wasn't chasing justice. I was standing in it. Patricia sends a message anonymously. "If this goes public, we all burn, including you." I didn't need a courtroom, just a room full of people who used to ignore me. Angela adjusted the lapel mic on my collar as the murmurs outside the main hall grew louder. Through the partially open double doors, I could see the shimmer of camera lights, reporters whispering to each other, and the long table at the center of the room. Every chair was taken. Every eye would be watching. This is not about revenge! I began stepping into the light. This is about truth, taking its rightful seat. A hush fell over the space. Patricia shifted in her chair, chin high. Marjorie wore the same pale beige suit I remembered from my father's funeral, like she couldn't be bothered to change even for the collapse of her own making. Angela connected her tablet to the central display and pulled up the file marked Original Will, Hastings Estate. The screen lit up behind me. Talia panned the live stream across the stunned faces. Todd sat beside me. He hadn't said a word since last night, but his presence was louder than a confession. The first document played a scanned, notarized copy of the original, will complete with my father's signature and a digital authentication from his private bank. Gasps erupted across the room. Then came the audio. Patricia's voice filled the hall. As long as Vivian never sees this, we're safe. My chest tightened. The crowd rippled with disbelief. Someone in the back whispered, "Is that real?" Angela nodded. We verified the metadata. This recording was captured on Patricia's device 2 weeks before Mr. Hastings' stroke. Patricia stood up. "You can't use that's private. You hacked my, no, I cut in. You left the door open." Next came the handwritten letter, my father's final words kept in the safe. Graham opened. The lines appeared one by one, projected onto the screen. In his own cursive, he explained why I was his choice, why he trusted me with the family name, the company, the vision we once shared. "I never wanted to erase anyone," I said softly, "only to be remembered by the truth." Patricia laughed bitterly. "Fine. I erased her because she was better than all of us." The room froze. Her words hung in the air like smoke. Then she looked up straight into the lens of Talia's camera. Angela didn't need to say anything. The live stream had caught it all. Reporters outside began typing. The first headline appeared before we even left the room. "Heiress erased, the Vivian Cross. Case breaks open." Angela stepped forward. "There will be no rebuttals. The record speaks for itself." Still, Marjorie raised her hand like a queen trying to control a crumbling court. "You expect people to believe this entire circus. Vivian has always been unstable emotional. This is her performance." Angela didn't flinch. "We've submitted the original will to 2 legal authorities for certification. You're welcome to dispute it. But be advised, perjury charges would be unwise." Todd finally spoke, rising beside me. "I was there when the will was read, and I remember what wasn't said. But I also remember what Dad told me years before the stroke. He said Vivian sees beyond money, she sees people." Marjorie turned sharply. "So now you're with her?" Todd didn't hesitate. "Now I'm with the truth." The silence that followed was denser than any argument. Talia turned the camera to me. This was the moment people would watch over and over online, the image that would define my legacy. "I was erased," I said, voice clear. Slow. "But names can be rewritten. Not through shouting, not through vengeance, but through proof and patience." Angela tapped her tablet again. Screens displayed a side-by-side timeline, one showing the falsified will's creation, the other showing Patricia's recorded confession. The visual truth was undeniable. The reporters had what they needed. But I wasn't done. "Legacy is not something you inherit," I said, walking to the front of the room, standing in the center like a painting on display. "It's something you build every day. You choose integrity over illusion." One final clip played my father's voice from an old recording long forgotten. "If Vivian ever finds this, tell her I'm proud of what she'll become." Marjorie wept silently. Patricia looked away, jaw tight. Angela closed the tablet. "We will file the restoration claim with the court tomorrow. But the court of public opinion has already delivered its verdict." Marjorie sat motionless. Patricia, now visibly shaken, leaned into her seat like gravity had doubled. The lights dimmed slightly, not for effect, but because the weight of truth has a way of changing the air. Outside the windows, Camera flashes continued to light the dusk. A humming drone hovered above the lawn, capturing every angle of a story, too long, silenced. Todd turned to me, gently squeezing my shoulder. Dad would have wanted this. I nodded. He knew the storm was coming. He just hoped I'd be the one to weather it. At last, I stepped down from the platform. My heel echoed once then again across the floor built by lies, but now reclaimed by truth. This wasn't an ending. It was a reckoning. And tomorrow, I would begin again. They built a house of lies. I just opened the windows. The snow outside Hastings Creative Trust was clean, silent, and heavy, too heavy for the footsteps it now swallowed. 1 week after the hearing, the building looked the same from the outside, but inside everything had cracked. The CEO's office sat cold and unoccupied, the plaque bearing Patricia Hastings' name already removed. I stood outside it watching as the lights inside flickered, as if uncertain whether to stay on or surrender to darkness. Angela met me by the elevator, tablet in hand. Marjorie's resignation letter was just accepted by the board. Patricia's accounts have been frozen pending the fraud audit. They'll likely offer a plea deal if we push. I didn't answer immediately. Graham had once told me silence was the most powerful punctuation in a room full of noise. So I used it. Todd arrived minutes later. His coat was dusted with snow, but he didn't shake it off. They want you inside. The board's ready. I walked in slowly, every footstep echoing off glass, chrome, and steel. The boardroom hadn't changed in 5 years, same oval table, same skyline view. But now, I sat at the head, and no one objected. Angela took her place beside me, sliding the original documents, the will, the father's letter, the legal confirmation into neat piles. One of the senior trustees cleared his throat. We've reviewed the evidence. It is the board's position that the actions of the previous leadership jeopardized the mission and assets of Hastings Creative Trust. Another chimed in. Therefore, we are extending an offer to Ms. Vivian Cross to serve as interim chief executive officer with full authority to reform the internal structure and submit a new vision charter. I stared at the papers. The pen felt heavier than it should. It wasn't the power that weighed, it was the cost. Todd slid a folded envelope across the table. My resignation. I've also written a public letter of apology. I was silent for too long. I nodded. Sometimes silence is the loudest crime. The room fell still. Outside the window, snow began to fall harder. I signed. Vivian Cross, interim CEO. But I wasn't done. After the board was dismissed, a young assistant approached. Ms. Cross, do you want the nameplate to say? I looked at her, a smile catching only one side of my face. No, I said. Just put the truth back. Later that afternoon, I walked the halls alone. The portraits of past executives still lined the walls. Charles Hastings, 2 decades younger than I remembered, stared out from a frame at the far end. For the first time, I didn't look away. In the executive suite, stacks of shredded reports filled recycling bins, documents that likely held decades of rewritten truths. I let my fingers glide across one of the marble counters. Cold, clean, like a place waiting to be reclaimed. In the communications wing, a press liaison approached me with a media packet. We've received over 40 interview requests. CNN, Forbes, even international outlets are calling this the Vivian Cross precedent. I raised an eyebrow. Not interested in being a symbol. Then, what should we call you? I paused. The correction. Graham had just returned from reviewing the firm's data integrity protocols. Every trace of their manipulations is being cataloged. If you want, we can make it public in phases. No, I said. Not yet. Let them watch the rebuild first. Let them see it's not about humiliation, it's about healing. Angela stopped by my office before leaving for the day. The estate transition paperwork will be finalized by Friday. You'll own the assets outright. I didn't even glance at the contracts. Ownership isn't the goal. Stewardship is. She nodded. Still, it's yours to shape. Outside, Christmas lights had started to glow along the avenue. A family walked by the building, their daughter pausing to stare at the doors, then at the nameplate newly installed near the front. I knew what it said, just 4 words in brushed steel, Hastings Creative Trust. No more first names, No more heirs, only the truth left standing. That night, I returned to the studio in Hudson. The paintings were still there, shadows and glass and silence. But this time, I opened the windows. Let the cold in. Let the world in. Because for the first time in years, I had nothing to hide and everything to do. Justice isn't loud. It just leaves no echo for lies to return. The gallery lights cast soft shadows across the polished floor. People spoke in hushed tones like in churches or funerals. This room was both sanctuary and grave for a nearly erased legacy. At the center stood the installation, a long table made of reclaimed walnut 12 chairs around it. 11 of them cast shadows that didn't match their form. One, the 12th, was real. The only chair that told the truth. The inheritance table read the placard. It was the piece no gallery wanted 5 years ago. Too personal, too political, too pointed. Now it held the room in silence. I entered just after sunset. No cameras, no reporters. Talia had handled the invitations precisely, Graham the logistics. For one evening, the art spoke uninterrupted. A woman nearby leaned toward the installation. This one feels sad, but complete. That's exactly how it was built, I said. From the corner, Lily said, that one's for her. She never left pointing to the real chair. Todd looked at me, his eyes softer. She was never really gone. I'm not, I said, touching the table's edge. And now I never will be. The room began to fill with strangers who knew the story from headlines and others who came just to see what silence looked like in wood and shadow. Talia guided a journalist to me. She won't ask about the lawsuit, Talia assured. I just wanted to say, thank you, the reporter said, for letting us see it all. The art always saw it. We just needed time to catch up, I replied. Across the room, a man stood alone, coat too light for winter eyes still. He held a folded aged paper. I caught a glimpse of my initials, for VC. Before I could reach him, he slipped it into his pocket and left. I didn't follow. That evening, I stood alone before the piece. The last guests had gone. Talia packed her camera. Graham spoke quietly with the curator. I traced the real chair. The wood felt alive. This wasn't revenge. This was restoration. I thought of my father, his voice in the letters, his sketches hidden in the safe. The table began as his idea. I finished it alone, but not anymore. Todd said, holding Lily's coat, she wants to come tomorrow to sit in the real chair. She can, I said. It's hers too. He paused. You're not angry? I was, I said. But anger only fills space where truth should be. He nodded. Maybe it's time I start again. I smiled. The city waited, but I had already moved on. Tomorrow would come. But tonight, silence spoke. They left me out of the story. So I built a place they could never forget me. Snow fell lightly across the grounds of the Westport estate, layering the iron gate in soft white. Each flake seemed to settle like memory, cold, fragile, impossible to hold for long. The hedges were trimmed, but dusted with snow. They looked like sculptures, frozen mid-thought. The gravel driveway, once filled with the tires of those who had stolen my name, now lay still, untouched, like it waited only for me. The name Vivian Cross glowed through the frost, the metal warm against the December chill. Christmas Eve had always been a performance for the Hastings. Lights, appearances, perfect pictures of imperfect people. Tonight, the stage was empty. I returned alone. Inside, the silence wasn't hollow anymore. It was honest. The kind of quiet that doesn't beg to be filled. I set my gloves on the entry table, dusted snowflakes from my shoulders, and walked the halls barefoot. The fire in the library was already lit. No doubt Graham's doing, though I hadn't told him I was coming. He always knew. There was comfort in that, some quiet understanding that this night of all nights required warmth, not just in temperature, but in meaning. A chair sat by the fire, its wood familiar. The same chair from the installation. I'd brought it here where it belonged. No audience, no spotlight, just a place to sit. A small brass key waited on the mantel. I recognized the handwriting on the envelope beside it immediately. Only open when it's over. I turned the key in the old hallway drawer, the one no one else ever touched. It creaked open slowly, like it hadn't been disturbed in years. Inside, no financial records, no blueprints or backup drives, just a single envelope, yellowed and soft. A letter. The last one he wrote. "My Vivian," it began. "I never doubted you, even when the house did. Even when they did. If you're reading this, you made it back not just here, but to yourself. The name is yours, because it always was." I read it twice, then a third time. The words didn't change, but the weight they carried grew heavier with each pass. He had trusted me, even when I had doubted myself. In his quiet, careful way, he had made room for me in a future he would never see. It didn't change the past, but it made the house feel less haunted. I wandered upstairs past portraits that once omitted me. The halls still remembered. I didn't need to remove their faces to reclaim my place. I simply needed to exist without apology. Back in the library, I poured a small glass of whiskey, just enough to warm, not enough to forget. The amber liquid caught the firelight like the past itself flickering, offering no apology, no judgment, only memory. The fire crackled. I sat in the chair. My chair? "They will remember my name," I said aloud, not because I forced them to, but because they tried to forget. Outside, the wind shifted. I stood to check the gate camera, out of habit more than need. The feed was blank. No cars, no footsteps, only snowfall. And then, a flicker. The nameplate lit up. No one had pressed the control inside. I waited for movement, a figure, a shadow, anything. But the light simply stayed on glowing soft gold through the snow. Maybe it was a malfunction. Or maybe someone remembered. I didn't need to know who. I only needed to know I hadn't been erased. Justice doesn't always roar. Sometimes it lingers in houses that wait, in names that shine again after being dimmed. And in silence, finally, peace. "Merry Christmas," I whispered. To no one, and to everyone. If you've ever been erased by family, by fate, by the ones who should have stood beside you, you already know my story. I didn't fight for revenge. I fought to be seen. So if my journey stirred something in you, say it out loud. Leave a comment. Let me know I'm not the only one who walked through silence to find truth. And if you're still fighting your own battle, don't shrink to fit someone else's version of you. Reclaim your name, your worth, your legacy. Justice might be slow, but if you stand firm, it will arrive. I promise.